A single dad opened his door to fix a stranger's problem. But instead he found the injured daughter of a billionaire CEO. What happened next changed both of their families forever. The rain hammered relentlessly against the tin roof of Mark Russell's small countryside home, turning the dim evening into a symphony of thunder, storm winds, and flickering lights. Mark had just tucked his 6-year-old daughter Lily into bed, whispering a soft goodnight kiss onto her forehead, her tiny hands still holding the stuffed rabbit she refused to sleep without. It had been another long day at the mechanic's shop, his muscles aching, his clothes soaked in the smell of oil and metal. But the moment he stepped into his humble living room, the weight of the world seemed to ease because this little house, no matter how old or imperfect, was filled with warmth. As he sank into his creaking wooden chair with a cup of tea, hoping for a moment of peace, a frantic knock suddenly echoed through the house, sharp enough to cut through the roar of the storm. Startled, Mark hurried toward the door, the knocks becoming more urgent, almost desperate. When he opened it, he froze. Standing on his porch was a young woman, drenched from head to toe, her hair plastered against her pale face, her breathing shaky and uneven. She clutched her left arm with visible pain. Her phone shattered in her trembling hand, and her designer clothes, what remained of them, were soaked and muddied. "Please, I think I was in an accident," she stammered, her voice barely louder than the storm behind her. Mark guided her in without hesitation, helping her sit on the couch as she winced. She looked around, clearly unfamiliar with a place so small, so humble. The golden embroidery on her expensive jacket, the diamond bracelet clinging to her wrist, and the polished heels on her feet revealed instantly that she was someone from a very different world, someone who didn't belong in a house like his. When she finally caught her breath, she muttered, "My name is Sarah. Sarah Carter." The name hit him harder than the thunder outside Carter, as in Jonathan Carter, the billionaire CEO whose empire practically ran half the state. What on earth was his daughter doing here? Alone, injured, and without help? Mark tried to ask her questions, but she winced and lowered her gaze, clearly shaken and trying to hold on to the last pieces of her composure. He offered her a warm blanket, made a quick call to the local hospital, and prepared some soup while she struggled to rest. Just then, Lily peeked out from the hallway, yawning and rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, who is she?" The innocence in her voice seemed to pierce Sarah deeper than her injury. Mark gently reassured Lily and sent her back to bed, but not before Lily whispered loudly, "She looks like a princess." For the first time since she arrived, a faint, broken smile crossed Sarah's lips. Despite the storm outside, despite the chaos of fate, something quiet and unexpected began forming in that small home, a connection neither of them yet understood. And on that unforgettable night, Mark had no idea that opening his door to a stranger would change both of their lives forever. Morning came slowly, with soft rays of sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of Mark's living room, casting a warm glow across the small space where Sarah Carter, heir to an empire, lay awkwardly under a worn-out blanket. Mark had been up early, quietly making breakfast while checking on her every few minutes, unsure if she needed help or simply privacy. When Sarah's eyes finally opened, she scanned the room in confusion, as if trying to understand how someone like her had ended up in such a modest home. The wooden furniture, the faded rug, the mismatched cushions, everything screamed simplicity, a life far from luxury. "Where am I?" she murmured, rubbing her temples, still disoriented from the accident. Mark stepped forward, carrying a steaming cup of tea. "You're safe. Storm was too bad to move you last night. Breakfast is almost ready." But instead of gratitude, Sarah frowned at her surroundings, her discomfort sharp and obvious. "This place doesn't even have central heating," she muttered under her breath, a habit formed from years of privilege, not malice. Mark, ever patient, simply shrugged. "We manage." Lily, fully awake now, bounced into the room wearing her purple pajamas, stopping instantly when she remembered the princess lady from last night. Her eyes grew wide in childish fascination. "You still here?" she exclaimed. Sarah, startled, tried to sit up, wincing as her injured leg protested. Careful, Mark warned. But Sarah brushed him off, insisting she didn't need help, though clearly she did. The hospital finally called back and explained that due to infrastructure damage from the storm, the ambulance would be delayed for several hours. The news only frustrated Sarah further. Unbelievable. This would never happen where I live, she snapped, pacing mentally even though her body could barely move. Mark didn't react, instead tending to the stove while Lily cautiously approached their guest. Do you want pancakes? The little girl asked shyly. Sarah opened her mouth as if about to decline, but exhaustion softened her expression. Sure, she said quietly. As the hours passed, the house filled with the simple rhythm of morning life. Lily playing with her crayons, Mark fixing a loose cabinet hinge, and Sarah reluctantly trying to stay occupied on the couch. She was unused to silence, true silence, not the expensive, curated quiet of penthouse suites, but the peaceful kind born from nature and distance from the world. Every creak of the house, every rustle of Lily's drawings, every casual, unfiltered conversation from Mark began to unsettle her in a way she couldn't explain. It felt real, too real. She found herself watching Mark as he worked his patience with Lily, his steady hands, the way he checked on Sarah without hovering. No chef, no assistant, no polished schedule, yet everything felt strangely comforting. Even so, she resisted it. When Mark offered lunch, she tried to be polite, but failed miserably. Do you have anything healthier? Maybe gluten-free? Mark's half-smile said everything. Not unless you count Lily's dinosaur gummies. That unexpectedly made Sarah chuckle, a small, reluctant sound. And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't feel like a stranger in the wrong place. She felt something far more unfamiliar safe. As the late morning settled over the small house, Sarah found herself slowly adjusting to the unfamiliar rhythm around her. She sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, feeling more exposed than she ever had, not because of her injury, but because of the simplicity of everything around her. In her penthouse, silence felt cold and hollow, a reminder of how empty her life truly was, but here, silence felt warm. Alive with the faint sounds of Lily humming as she colored on the floor, and Mark fixing something in the kitchen. It was a different kind of world, one she had only ever seen in movies. As she gazed out the window, her mind drifted back to the accident, the sound of the crash replaying in her head like a haunting echo. She winced, gripping the couch cushion, trying to swallow the fear rising in her chest. Lily noticed instantly. The little girl waddled over, holding her favorite crayon drawing, a lopsided house with two stick figures. Are you sad because your house is far away? Lily asked with the disarming innocence of a child. Sarah blinked, overwhelmed. No one had asked her such a genuine question in years. Most people wanted updates, business decisions, or access to her father. But Lily asked because she cared, simply and sincerely. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but the words got stuck. Her throat tightened as she realized just how lonely her life had become. I just miss a lot of things, she whispered softly. Mark overheard from the kitchen, pausing as he watched the moment between the two. He saw something fragile beneath Sarah's polished exterior, something he recognized, pain. He had lived with it too, after losing his wife and struggling to raise Lily alone. When he returned with tea, Sarah looked away, embarrassed to have been caught in a vulnerable moment. I'm fine, she muttered automatically, the very phrase she had used for years to keep people at a distance. But Mark didn't push. You don't always have to be, he said gently, placing the cup beside her. That simple sentence shook her more than she expected. No one in her world ever said things like that. Vulnerability was seen as weakness, emotions as distractions, and slowing down as failure. Being Jonathan Carter's daughter meant she had to be perfect, strong, composed, a living reflection of success. But here, in this tiny living room with peeling paint and a worn-out couch, she didn't feel judged. She felt human. Hours later, as Lily showed her drawings and told stories about school, Sarah realized something startling. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, without forcing it. The tension in her shoulders eased, and the anxiety that had wrapped around her heart loosened. Mark watched this transformation quietly, noticing how differently she behaved around his daughter. The woman who arrived with sharp edges and cold walls was slowly revealing warmth. Beneath the surface warmth she didn't even know she still had. And as the afternoon sunlight bathed the room, Sarah felt a strange, unexpected sense of peace settle over her, a feeling she had long forgotten. Back in the city, miles away from the quiet warmth of Mark's small home, Jonathan Carter's world was spiraling into panic. The billionaire CEO, known for his unshakable composure in boardrooms and his ruthless precision in business, found himself pacing his mansion like a terrified father, because that was exactly what he was in that moment. Sarah hadn't returned home. Her phone wasn't reachable. The accident report confirmed her car had been found damaged off a rural road. Hours passed with no updates until finally, through GPS data, an address appeared, a tiny house outside town. Jonathan didn't wait for his security team. He grabbed his coat and drove himself, every passing minute tightening the fear in his chest. When he arrived at the small wooden home, he hesitated, confused by the simplicity of the place. It didn't belong to Sarah's world of luxury and protection. It looked fragile, old, too small to hold the worries swirling in his mind. With trembling hands, he knocked, and Mark opened the door. What happened next was a collision of two worlds so different they almost repelled each other. Jonathan stepped inside with sharp eyes and an instinctive defensiveness, ready to accuse, question, demand. But the moment he saw Sarah sitting comfortably on Mark's couch, wrapped in a faded quilt, her leg bandaged, Lily sitting beside her, proudly showing her drawings, all of Jonathan's rehearsed words evaporated. "Sarah," he breathed, voice cracking with relief. She looked up at him, her father, always distant, always busy, always powerful, standing there soaked in worry. "Dad, I'm okay," she said softly, and those 3 words struck him harder than anything. Jonathan rushed to her, checking her injuries with trembling fingers, but Sarah gently pushed his hands away. "Dad, really, I'm safe." That's when Jonathan's guarded gaze shifted to Mark. His posture stiffened, suspicion taking over. "Who are you? What happened here?" he demanded, sounding more like a courtroom prosecutor than a grateful father. Mark remained calm. He explained everything: the accident, the storm, the hospital delay, and how he simply offered help because she needed it. Jonathan listened, but with the skeptical sharpness of a man who trusted no one. His life had taught him that every kindness came with a price. But Mark's eyes held nothing but sincerity. For the first time, Jonathan noticed the home around him. The children's drawings on the fridge, the repaired furniture, the worn-out shoes by the door. It was a place built on love, not wealth. Meanwhile, Lily climbed onto Sarah's lap, unaware of the tension between the adults. "She's my friend now," she announced proudly, handing Jonathan a crayon drawing with 3 figures: Lily, Sarah, and Mark. Jonathan stared at it, his walls cracking as the truth sank in. His daughter wasn't afraid here. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't hiding her emotions behind designer clothes and forced smiles. She was comfortable, she was cared for, and she was happy, something he realized he hadn't seen in a very long time. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt humility wash over him. His worldview collided with Mark's, and in that quiet living room filled with warmth, crayons, and unexpected kindness, he realized that not all heroes wore suits. Some wore worn-out jeans and lived in tiny houses, but had hearts far bigger than any mansion. In the days that followed Jonathan's unexpected visit, something subtle yet profound began to shift inside Sarah. What was meant to be a temporary stay, just long enough for an ambulance to arrive, turned into a recovery far longer than anyone predicted. The storm had damaged several major roads, and the hospital advised her to avoid long travel until the swelling in her leg decreased. Mark offered no complaints, no pressure, no hesitation. He simply made space for her in the small home, adding pillows to the couch, adjusting the heater, and checking her bandage with gentle, almost fatherly concern. Sarah found herself observing him more than she meant to, noticing how he always woke up early to prepare Lily's school lunch, how he never complained about his job, how he balanced every responsibility with a quiet steadiness she had never seen in her own father. In her world, people moved fast, talked loud, made deals, chased achievements. But Mark moved with purpose, not pressure. It fascinated her. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the living room window, Sarah attempted to help make breakfast. She limped toward the stove, insisting on preparing scrambled eggs. Mark practically jumped to stop her. "You should be resting," he said firmly. "And you should learn to let people do things for you." She shot back before realizing how comfortable she had become around him. A small, playful smile appeared on her lips, one she hadn't felt in years. They cooked together, laughing at her complete lack of kitchen skills. Lily woke up to the sound of sizzling eggs and instantly joined in, wrapping her tiny arms around Sarah's waist like they were family. The simple moment shook Sarah deeply. No one in her world hugged her without a reason. Affection in her life usually came reserved, polite, filtered through schedules and formality. Here, Lily hugged freely, without thinking twice, and the warmth of that small gesture melted something inside Sarah that had been frozen for far too long. Later that afternoon, when Mark returned from work, Sarah surprised him by fixing the loose drawer he'd complained about earlier. She looked up proudly as he entered. "I watched you fix stuff yesterday. Thought I'd try it myself." Mark laughed, impressed, and something unspoken passed between them. A mutual respect, a quiet understanding. Jonathan visited occasionally, each visit filled with awkward yet slowly improving conversations. Even he couldn't deny his daughter seemed happier here. One evening, he watched from the doorway as Sarah and Lily built a makeshift pillow fort, laughing until they collapsed in a heap of giggles. The sight softened him more than he expected. "I haven't seen her laugh like that in years," he admitted to Mark, his voice low, almost ashamed. Mark didn't judge him. He simply nodded. Sometimes people just need a little space to breathe. As days turned into a quiet routine, trust blossomed effortlessly between Sarah and Mark, between Sarah and Lily, and even between Jonathan and the man he once regarded as a stranger. In the quiet moments over shared meals, small repairs, bedtime stories, and morning sunlight for the first time in a long time, Sarah found something she never knew she was missing. A home that didn't need chandeliers to feel warm. And a family that didn't need blood to feel real. One peaceful Saturday evening, as the golden sunset washed the small house in warm orange light, Sarah sat on the porch with Lily curled up beside her, both of them wrapped in a soft blanket. Mark was inside cooking dinner, humming quietly, a gentle rhythm Sarah had grown to love. She felt a strange sense of comfort in this world, one she never expected to be part of. The breeze carried the scent of pine trees and fresh earth, a stark contrast to the cold perfumes, polished floors, and tinted windows of her life in the penthouse. Just as she closed her eyes to breathe in the moment, a familiar car pulled into the driveway, sleek, black, and unmistakably expensive. Jonathan Carter stepped out, though this time he wore no suit, no tie, no guarded expression. Instead, he looked almost nervous, carrying a grocery bag awkwardly in one hand. Sarah stared in surprise. Jonathan had never visited anyone without an appointment, certainly not with groceries. He walked toward them hesitantly and paused when he saw Sarah smiling, truly smiling. "I brought food," he said stiffly, as if the words felt foreign in his mouth. Mark opened the door, equally surprised to see the CEO standing there holding tomatoes and pasta like a confused assistant. "Figured I'd help with dinner," Jonathan added, clearing his throat. Mark stepped aside, amused but welcoming. As the three adults gathered in the kitchen, the atmosphere felt strangely intimate, like a family trying to learn each other's rhythms. Jonathan watched silently as Mark cooked, noticing how carefully he chopped vegetables, how patiently he explained to Lily what each ingredient was, how naturally Sarah leaned against the counter, laughing and talking. Jonathan's expression softened with each passing minute. After dinner, he asked Mark to step outside for a moment. The air grew heavier. They sat on the porch, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath them. At first, the silence stretched, thick with unspoken differences, wealth versus struggle, privilege versus humility, father versus father figure. Jonathan finally broke the silence. I owe you more than I can ever repay. His voice was low, stripped of the confidence he displayed in boardrooms. Mark shook his head. You don't owe me anything. She needed help. Anyone would have done the same. Jonathan let out a breath that sounded like a confession. No, not anyone. You gave her something I couldn't? Mark looked at him, genuinely confused. What's that? Jonathan glanced through the window, watching Sarah and Lily build another pillow fort, their faces glowing with laughter. Peace, he whispered. She's been trying to be strong for so long that she forgot how to just exist. Mark's chest tightened. He knew what it felt like to forget how to breathe under the weight of life. Jonathan continued, his voice cracking at the edges. I spent years building an empire and lost sight of the one person who needed me the most. Mark didn't judge him. He understood the struggle of trying to be everything at once. It's not too late, he said gently. Jonathan nodded, swallowing hard, and for the first time. The two men shared a moment of mutual understanding, two fathers, two worlds, one truth. And it was in that quiet conversation, under the dim porch light and the whisper of evening wind, that the first real bridge between their lives was finally built. The following week unfolded with a gentle rhythm, but beneath the calm surface, emotions were shifting in ways none of them fully understood. Sarah felt stronger physically, but emotionally she was unraveling slowly, quietly, in moments between laughter and stillness. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep and Mark was cleaning the kitchen, Sarah stepped outside to breathe the cool evening air. The moon cast a soft glow over the yard, the crickets humming like a distant lullaby. She leaned against the railing, trying to fight the heaviness pressing on her chest. The accident, the fear, the memories of her lonely life, all of it came crashing back. Her breath quickened, her hands trembling as the panic she'd been suppressing for days surged through her. Mark noticed the shift instantly through the open window and hurried outside. Sarah? Hey, look at me, he said softly, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. But she couldn't focus. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat raced. I can't breathe, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mark guided her to sit, kneeling in front of her, his voice calm, anchored, patient. You're okay. I'm right here. Breathe with me. Slow, just like this. It took several minutes that felt like years, before Sarah finally felt her lungs loosen and her world returned to solid ground. When the panic faded, she broke into sobs, raw and unfiltered. I'm so tired of pretending I'm strong. Everyone expects so much from me, and I have no idea who I'm supposed to be anymore. She never cried in front of anyone, not her father, not her friends, not even herself. But with Mark, the walls she'd spent her whole life building simply collapsed. Without hesitation, Mark wrapped his arms around her in a protective embrace, holding her the way someone holds something fragile and precious. You don't have to be strong all the time, he whispered. Not here. Not with us. Sarah clung to him, as if the truth in his words was the only thing keeping her afloat. Neither of them realized that Jonathan had arrived, and now stood frozen near the porch, witnessing everything. He had come to drop off some documents she needed to sign for insurance purposes. But when he saw his daughter shaking and crying in Mark's arms, his heart shattered in ways he never knew it could. For years, he thought protecting her meant providing for her money, security, opportunities, but he had missed the simplest part, being present. Tears stung his eyes, something that hadn't happened since the day Sarah's mother walked out. When Mark finally noticed him, Jonathan stepped closer, voice trembling. Thank you for being there when I wasn't. Sarah pulled away slightly, startled to see her father, but the understanding in his eyes wasn't anger. It was remorse, a deep and aching regret. Jonathan approached her gently. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he whispered. I should have seen your pain. I was too busy being the man everyone expected me to be. Instead of the father you needed. Sarah's tears returned, but this time not from panic, from healing. The three of them stood there, broken in different ways yet bound together in a moment of raw vulnerability. And as Lily sleepily wandered out onto the porch, rubbing her eyes and hugging Sarah's leg, it became clear. This wasn't just an act of kindness anymore. This was a family being forged, not by blood or obligation, but by understanding, compassion, and the unexpected love that grows when people allow themselves to truly be seen. In the weeks that followed that night on the porch, life settled into a gentle, almost healing rhythm for all of them. Sarah continued her recovery, though now the physical pain had become secondary to the emotional transformation she was undergoing. She spent her mornings helping Lily get ready for school, tying her shoelaces, brushing her hair into messy ponytails, laughing at her wild stories about imaginary dragons and schoolyard adventures. Mark watched these scenes quietly, often from the kitchen doorway, realizing just how seamlessly Sarah had slipped into their lives. He never expected someone from her world, polished, wealthy, guarded, to fit into a home as humble as his, yet somehow she brought light into corners of their lives he didn't even know were dim. Meanwhile, Jonathan made sincere efforts to mend his relationship with his daughter. He visited without security, without schedules, just a father wanting to understand the child he had overlooked for so long. He helped Mark repair the backyard fence, learned how to slice vegetables without a chef guiding his hand, and even joined Lily in her living room dance parties, awkwardly wiggling his shoulders while the others laughed until their stomachs hurt. Slowly, the rigid CEO began to melt into someone softer, someone real. What surprised everyone most was how naturally the two families began blending into one. Dinner conversations flowed effortlessly, Lily switching seats each night depending on who she wanted to sit beside. Sarah often cleaned the kitchen with Mark, their elbows brushing, exchanging small smiles that spoke louder than words. Jonathan found comfort in the rare quiet moments, sitting outside on Mark's porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars and remembering what life felt like before it became a series of meetings and deadlines. But the true turning point came one afternoon when Sarah, now fully healed, prepared to return to the city. She stood in Mark's living room, suitcase beside her, eyes lingering on every corner of the home that had protected her when she needed it most. Lily hugged her tightly, arms wrapped around her waist, refusing to let go. "Do you have to leave?" The little girl whispered. Sarah's throat tightened. She didn't want to leave. Every fiber of her heart told her that this place, these people, had become more of a home than any penthouse suite. Jonathan, standing nearby, watched his daughter's hesitation with a knowing expression. "You don't have to rush back," he said gently. "Your place will always be there. But maybe this place matters too." Sarah looked at Mark, the man who had given her warmth without asking anything in return. Her eyes shimmered. "I don't want this to end," she admitted softly. Mark stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "It doesn't have to," he said, his voice steady and sincere. And so, instead of goodbye, Sarah made a choice, one that surprised no one and healed everyone. She decided to stay part-time with Mark and Lily, splitting her life between the world she came from and the world she had grown to love. The bond between the families deepened, not through obligation, but through genuine connection. In the end, what began with fear and uncertainty became a new beginning for all of them, a reminder that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when your world falls apart and stay to help you build it back again. And in that small, humble home, surrounded by laughter, second chances, and newfound love, Sarah finally found something priceless, a life worth living, and a family she never expected but always needed. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow Drew Daily Stories for more emotional, life-changing tales. Your next favorite story is only one click away. Join our family today.